All right, everybody. We're back to chapter 4. So, Grandma and Joey are heading to the park to play golf. I followed Grandma out to the front porch. "Help me get into my buggy," she said, pointing to an old grocery cart on the sidewalk with an old couch cushion on the bottom. I must have looked confused because she kicked a small stepladder on the porch and said, "Use this." I did have a little hand cart for the oxygen, but Carter said it cost too much to rent. So now he just gets me the tank with the shoulder case, and because it's so heavy, I don't get very far. I put the stepladder next to the cart and steadied it with one hand and her with the other as she climbed in. I lifted her oxygen tank up and over the edge of the cart, and I set it in her lap. I put the tin bucket of old golf balls between her feet, and I slid the 2-iron in by her side. "Don't forget to fold the stepladder up and slide it underneath," she instructed, "or I'll never get out." After I did that, I grabbed Pablo and strapped him into the baby seat, then pushed them down the sidewalk and turned onto the road as Grandma adjusted her little sun umbrella. "You know, I could always read your mind, Joey," she started up. Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the rattle of the cart on the asphalt. I could always look into those spinning eyes of yours and know what you had cooking up behind them." "I don't know what you mean, Grandma," I said, but right away I noticed my hands were shaking and I felt a little antsy. "I know you think you could get your mom and dad back together again. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because there's not a kid alive who doesn't think they could get their parents back together once they split up. But do yourself a favor. Forget about it. Those two should be apart." "I only came to visit Dad," I said. "Well, I hope that's true. But just the other day he said it's his dream to get his whole family together." My heart started pounding because Grandma said something that I had joked about with Mom. In the car, Mom told me to forget about her ever liking Dad. Ever! But now the idea that Dad secretly wanted the family together only confused me. I didn't know what to say, so I changed the subject back to golf. "Grandma, how's your game?" I asked. Pretty good since I've been working regular on it. Your dad went and got me a starter set of clubs with all the cigarette coupons I've saved up. I can't tell if he's being nice to me or if he wants me to exercise myself right into the grave." I didn't know what to say to that either, so I just kept quiet. When we reached the park, I could only push the cart a few feet in the grass before the wheels stuck. So I got the stepladder and I helped her out over the side. Then I got the oxygen tank in the front corner of the cart so she could have a few feet of tubing to move around. Kind of like an astronaut walking around in space. "Now, you go out there and run for about 50 yards, and I'll hit some golf balls to you." "Do I get a helmet?" I asked, as I unstrapped Pablo and set him down. "No, just don't let them hit your noggin. If you go home with a dent in your precious head, your mother will have a cow." "What about my eyes?" Put these on," she said, and she tossed me her pink old lady sunglasses. "Now, no more questions, just get going." "Come on, Pablo," I shouted, and we took off across the grass. I had to run with one hand holding the glasses against my face because they were too big. They fit like circus clown glasses. When I looked over my shoulder, Grandma was turning off her oxygen with one hand and holding a cigarette in the other. I figured in about 30 seconds, she'd be ready to ricochet a ball off my head. The moment we got 50 yards out, Pablo had to go. He tramped around in a little circle and squatted. His whole body began to vibrate like he was pooping right on the North Pole. I looked up at Grandma. She was smiling. And then she aimed the head of her club at us. She reared back and teed off. "Hurry up, Pablo," I advised as the ball landed about 10 yards away. "She's a pretty good shot." I heard her hit another. I looked up into the air, but the ball was lost in the whiteness of a cloud. Then, thunk, it hit a little closer. Pablo stuck his butt up into the air as he finished his business. "Hurry, you don't want her to hit a hole-in-one," I said. "Get a move on." And he did. He ran around in figure eights. Once I got used to spotting the balls in the sky, it was easy to catch up on them. I let them hit the ground, then I'd throw them back to where could reach them with her club and tee up again. Every time Grandma had a cigarette, she turned her oxygen off, and every time she finished one, she turned it right back on. We kept this up for about an hour. I liked being outside, running around in the grass with Pablo. It was just the kind of activity Mom was hoping to provide for me. And I wish she was here to see that not everything with Grandma was awful. I had just picked up a ball when I looked toward Grandma to get ready for her next shot. She raised the golf club back up over her head, and in an instant, I saw that the oxygen tube looped around the head of her golf club. Grandma, Grandma, don't swing! I shouted. She went into her swing with a big smile on her face, maybe because Pablo had stopped to rest and she had him lined up in her sights, when suddenly the club hit the ball and at the same time ripped the oxygen clip clean out of her nose. Her head jerked forward, and she stumbled and fell to her knees. The ball whistled over my head as I ran toward her. By the time I got there, she had hoisted herself up with the club and was standing with her hands on her hips, and a little stream of blood was slithering down her upper lip and around the corner of her mouth. The sun made the blood very shiny. Of all the brainless, cockeyed things I've ever done, this beats the pants off them all, she snapped. Are you okay? I asked. Grandma, you're bleeding. She ran her hand over her mouth. Don't ever live to be old, she said to me, or you'll have lived to regret it, I promise you. Then she bent over and began to cough like she would never stop, and the nosebleed splattered all over her face. It looked like she'd been in a fight. And Pablo saw the blood and went nuts. Sit down, Grandma. No, or I'll never get up again, she replied between gasps for breath. Just get me home. With that, and then with what sounded like her last breath ever, she said, and shut that yapping dog up. Shh, I said to Pablo. It's not good manners to laugh at other people's mistakes. How do you know what he is laughing at? She wheezed. Well, he actually wasn't laughing, but I didn't want to tell her that the sight of blood made him hysterical. I picked up the oxygen clip and gave it to her. She gripped it between her teeth and breathed until she began to settle down. I gathered the rest of the balls, put them and the club back into the cart. I got her up the stepladder and comfy on her little cushion. I grunted and groaned and pushed and pulled the cart out of the grass and back onto the asphalt, and we headed for home. When we got there, I led Grandma into the bathroom. Grandma, just sit on the toilet seat and I'll help clean you up. I opened the medicine chest and found a plastic bottle of peroxide. I poured it on some tissue and wiped it around her nose and upper lip as she flinched left and right. It was just a little cut. She said it hurt a lot. I need a rest, she said, sounding tired. Can't do as much as I used to. It's a good thing I don't have to chase you around all day anymore. Then she stood and shuffled over to the couch to take a nap. I know that when I'm around crazy people, it can bring out the craziness in me. But I was telling myself my medicine had helped me stay calm, and that no matter who I was around, it was up to me to take a deep breath and make good decisions for myself. That's what I was thinking as I sneaked into Dad's room. I wanted to see what it looked like, and if he had put the storybook photo on me on his dresser. As I looked around, I noticed everything was in perfect place. Pennies, nickels, dimes were neatly stacked in columns. Little boxes of matches were lined up in a row like dominoes. There was a small jar of toothpicks and a matching one for Q-tips. But there was no picture of me. Just one of a tall, red-haired woman in a baseball uniform. She was waving a bat over her head as if she was going to swat the photographer. Next to that was a baseball, sitting on something like a golf tee. I picked it up. I didn't think Dad would mind if I practiced my throwing. I walked out back, and I threw it from one side of the yard to the other. I picked targets to hit like old cans, broken flower pots, an empty birdhouse, and sprinklers. I liked doing it because I was good at it, and hitting something over and over again kept me from thinking about what Grandma had said about Dad trying to get the family together. When Dad came home, he found me in the yard. He was holding 2 baseball gloves and tossing one to me. Try this on, he said, smiling and rocking his head back and forth. I worked my fingers up into the holes, and it felt like a good fit. Now hold it over your face and smell it, he said. So I did. Have you ever smelled anything better? Nothing, I said, and smelled it again. Now, go over to the other side of the yard and throw me one as hard as you can. I did. I reared back and I let it fly, and it smacked when it hit his glove. Wow, he said. That was some heat. But when he pulled the ball out of his glove, his eyes got big. Where did you get this ball? He asked. Your room, I said quietly, because I didn't know if I was allowed in his room. This is my signed Roberto Clemente ball, he said. So, I said, does your mother keep you hidden under a rock? You don't know who Clemente is? Well, I don't play much with other kids because they tease me, I said. He stared intensely at me for a moment, like he was trying to make up his mind to be mad or not. Then that big canoe smile floated out over his mouth. Well, I'm sure Roberto won't mind training the next Cy Young winner, he said, tossing the ball at me and punching his fist into his glove. Right in the pocket, he said. Bring Roberto back to Papa. I leaned way back, then fired another one across the yard, right at the spot he punched. Smack! Wow, he said again. Don't you worry about kids teasing you. From now on, they're going to be hounding you for an autograph. You have an arm like a cannon, dude. Told you I was good at throwing stuff, I said. Can you hit, too? He asked. I don't know. I've never tried that part. Well, we'll find out tomorrow, he said. I'll take you to a game. I called Mom today, and I told her I was on your team. How is she? He asked, tossing me the ball. Great, I said as it slapped into my glove. She's dyeing her hair red. Dad arched his eyebrows, and his canoe smile rocked back and forth across his face. She was always a sharp-looking redhead, and I sure do have a thing for redheads. Then he sort of looked a little lost, like he was missing her. I was going to throw the ball again, but I was afraid it would bounce off his head. So I let him think for a while. I think it's time that you go look up Roberto Clemente. Clemente is Clemente. You'll find out why Dad was upset.